My name is Sean, aka Watery Aquarius, and you're listening to the Hacking Astrology podcast. Here I teach you how to hack your astrology charts to help you deconstruct the toxic concepts that come along with learning astrology and teach you how to have a healthier relationship with astrology. Let's escape toxic astrology together. Hey, what's up? It's Watery Aquarius, aka Sean. You may know me on Instagram, TikTok, perhaps Twitter. I am a professional astrologer, practicing astrologer of 3 years, going on 4 years actually. And this is the Hacking Astrology podcast. This is my astrology podcast where we will be deconstructing the toxic concepts of astrology, where we will be escaping toxic astrology. And I'll be teaching you how to have a healthier relationship with astrology yourself. There's lots of stereotypes built into astrology. Astrology can get kind of scary because it is quite deterministic, right? It tells us what's going to happen. It gives us fixed placements and transits for things. But if you saw these goggles, these are my hacking astrology goggles. So they help me see the toxic parts of astrology. But now that I wore them already, I could take it off. So I'm going to take it off. But it goes with the theme of the podcast. So that's always good. So before we move on, I'd like to introduce you to a brand that I really love. They're called Birth Date Candles, and they've gifted me a lot of things, and they gift me candles every month. So thank you to Birth Date Candles. But this candle is a Zodiac candle. It's a candle of your birthday. So it's customized for the day of your birthday. So they attribute certain scents to certain days. So this is lavender, sage, and neroli, and it's an Aquarius candle because I'm not sure if it's just Aquarius because it's February 6th and that's when Aquarius is, or if it's Aquarius what decan. I think it says 2. Anyway, it has cool information. It says on the back, like, those born February 6th have a talent for making friends and for bringing out the best in people. So that's cool. It's very Aquarius, right? The moon is in Aquarius right now. But if you want to buy a candle like this, you can get 10% off using my code in my bio. Oop. And yeah, buy a candle from Birth Date Candle. We love them. So moving on to the show, each week I will hack an area of astrology, whether that's love, sexuality, gender, beauty, synastry, transits, etc. And I'll basically be exposing the toxic parts and teaching you how I kind of deal with it in a responsible, healthy way as a professional astrologer. So this first episode will just be exploring toxic astrology, and I'll be introducing it to you and kind of my angle on certain parts of toxic astrology. So this is kind of like variety episode. We'll just be talking about toxic astrology in general, and then the future episodes will get into love and gender and all that kind of fun stuff. But let's dig in. So first on our list to do, which will happen on every podcast, is that we will have a hack of the week. And so the hack of the week is basically a hack into astrology in order to understand it easily, and to interpret your chart a lot more efficiently. So today's hack of the week is about the natural order of the zodiac. And again, this series is going to be progressive. So we're going to build on this, and I'm going to teach you hacks that will get a little bit more advanced as time goes on. But for the beginners that are watching, we just want to make sure that they are tended to. The natural order of the zodiac. Everybody kind of knows this. I didn't really know this getting into astrology, but there is the natural order of the zodiac. So the signs in the zodiac are ordered from 1 to 12, where certain signs are the first sign of the zodiac and certain signs are the last sign of the zodiac. That happens to be Aries to Pisces. So Aries is number 1 and Pisces is number 12. And Libra in the middle is number 7. So when we look at a birth chart wheel, you're going to see a circle with 12 sections. When you see that first section in the birth chart, that's the first house. And if you know your rising sign, you know the sign of your first house. So I have Cancer in my first house, slash, I'm a Cancer rising. So since I know the sign of the first house, I would have to know the signs of every other house because the zodiac is ordered in a certain number from 1 to 12. Because I'm a Cancer rising, which is the fourth sign of the zodiac, I know that my second house in whole sign houses will be in Leo. So that is a hack to understand someone's birth chart. So if someone tells you their rising sign, you should know what house their seventh house, that what sign their seventh house is in, what sign their midheaven is in. You should know that based on, you don't even need a calculator. You can do it in your head. And this is the first step to visualizing birth charts so that you can understand them a lot more easily. So when we talk about opposite signs, there's 12 signs in the zodiac, and they have 6 pairs that are opposite to each other. And so when you look at a chart, because you know the rising sign is the first house and the seventh house is on the right angle of the chart, the opposite sign of the rising sign would be the sign of your seventh house. So this would be the energy of your partnerships, of your relationships. So this may not be so basic, but I think that if you use my lesson, I have an online course on my link in bio where it teaches you how to start reading a birth chart. And I think that's the perfect way to have a foundation for learning these hacks and also listening to my podcast. So next up, we have roast of the week, which basically I'll be roasting someone's placements that they submitted to me on Instagram, but I'll be doing it in a self-help way, a self-development way. We're not making fun of people. We're not trying to say people are not able to do certain things. We can only say that certain signs may have difficulty with certain things. We can't say for sure, right? But moving on, the first placement that we'll be looking at is by Shaylama Kudiep. So this placement is an Aries Sun, Libra Moon, and Capricorn rising. So as we talked about before with this hack, when you know the rising sign, you know what the sign of the first house is. And so you know what the signs of the other houses is. So since this person is a Capricorn rising, which is the 10th sign of the zodiac, and they also have an Aries sun, which is the first sign of the zodiac, I can tell in a whole sign houses chart that their Aries sun is in. So they have an Aries sun in the 4th house. So yes, they are very Aries. They have that cardinal fire energy, leadership oriented action, that Mars energy, that masculine energy. But it's in the 4th house. So it's a little bit more toned down, which is really interesting when we talk about sexuality and how someone expresses their sexuality. Because, you know, the 4th house is a very feminine house, not in terms of social roles or gender roles, but more in like a divine feminine way. You know, divine feminine is about receiving, and divine masculine is about expressing and putting out. So yeah, with like Mars energy, masculine energy in the 4th house, it can describe like perhaps a mismatching of energies of someone who may be too masculine to kind of find stability. I don't want to say they're too masculine to find stability, but it's like this overpowering, this overthrowing of the household in a way. It's not like stable security. There's lots of movement there. So I would say like this person really wants to be the leader of the household in order to, I think, reestablish their home. But they also have a Libra moon, and the Libra moon would be, because the Libra is the opposite sign of Aries. Libra is the 7th sign of the zodiac. Since Aries is in the 4th house, Libra moon would be in the 10th house, which is very interesting when we talk about like security and establishing security for ourselves, because the 4th and the 10th house, you know, the 4th house has to do with home. The 10th house has to do with our legacy and kind of like our public imprint, our life, perhaps our career. But with Libra there, which is ruled by Venus, so way more feminine placement in the 10th house, which is a masculine place, a masculine environment. So I would say this person definitely perhaps maybe struggles with their sexuality or struggles with understanding how they want to present themselves to the public, like in terms of, their energy. Like, do you want to do more, or do you just want to accept and work with someone and compromise? Next up, we'll be roasting Roga Brielli, and their placement is Venus and Leo in the 12th house. Now, I find this placement very interesting because the 12th house is like the house of hidden things. People here are usually a little bit shyer. They're a little bit more internal, right? They need their space. They need their alone time to process their emotions. But with Venus there in Leo, Venus in Leo has a very put myself out there vibe. It gives very see what I'm doing, see what I'm working with, see how I can care for you, see how I can flirt with you, see what kind of hobbies I do, see what kind of talent I'm into, and like hone that with me, practice that with me. Like that's what that Venus and Leo says. But in the 12th house, it's a little bit more hidden, right? So like even love affairs might be a little bit more hidden. Like they might have like secret relationships or not like to like show their relationships to the public. But yeah, it's just interesting when you have this Leo sun energy, which is about light and illumination, and it's about fate really, in the 12th house. So I think it's a very karmic placement, I would say. So maybe relationships can be a little bit difficult, and you find hard like understanding what compliments look like in a relationship, perhaps. All right, next we have Nina Reen, and this person is a Pisces Sun, Cap Moon, Sag Rising. So Sag Rising, ninth sign of the zodiac, Cap Moon, the 10th sign of the zodiac. So we know we have Moon in the second house. The second house has to do with our material possessions, our materialism, our connection to money, that sort of thing. How we value money in our life. In a psychological way, it also can do with our self-worth. So what is the value that we put on ourselves? The same way that we put value on money, what's the value that we put on ourselves? And with the Cap Moon there, it's really difficult because the moon in the second house really shows someone who's pretty sensitive and like doesn't has problems with stability in life, and like their life is totally fluctuating in stability, whether it is financial or whether it is like shelter wise or job wise. But with the Cap Moon, it also describes someone who's like an overachiever, like they're doing the most at the same time. So it's like they're really sensitive about their success with perhaps money. Their success is really tied to their concept of their self-worth. And then the Pisces Sun is the 12th sign of the zodiac, and that would be in the 4th house. So we have Sun in the 4th house, Moon in the 2nd house. So this is a very subterranean chart where the placements are below the top hemisphere of the chart. So it's a little bit like in the mind, a little bit quieter, a little bit shyer, a little bit more internal, and that sort of thing. So I can say like this person might not get out a lot. They might not do a lot of stuff outside or just like in the public, especially with that Pisces Sun in the 4th house. Definitely wants to stay home and find like home within home. And yeah, but that Cap Moon is pretty interesting because it does describe this sensitivity to being perfect and being successful, but in terms of how you base yourself in this world. So that can become pretty problematic in a way, if that makes sense. So moving on to the issue of the week, which is toxic astrology in general. And I think the first thing that I want to start off with is describing how I look at astrology. Now, a lot of people look at astrology as like cause and effect, oh, why is Mercury retrograde making me do this? Why is my Saturn return making me do this? And I feel like that can fall into like this victim mindset where we feel like we can't do anything about it. But I like to use astrology as a reflection. The planets don't cause what's happening in my life. The planets are reflecting what's going on in my life. The planets are the story of my life. All these different charts are stories of my life. and they're spelled out in stars and planets. So it's that our charts tell us about our life. They're describing our life. They're not affecting our lives. All these transits, they're reflecting the reality of the situations through astrology. So defining what healthy astrology is versus toxic astrology, I wrote down some adjectives that I think, that I know define healthy and toxic astrology. So healthy astrology is responsible. There's a responsibility with healthy astrology, a responsibility not to use charts in a way to trigger yourself, to get yourself into, to lock yourself into a toxic thought loop. Healthy astrology is wise. So you're being wise with your chart. You're not using your chart to dwell on certain things that don't benefit you and don't serve your highest good. Healthy astrology is balance. So, we're using astrology to help us, but we're not letting astrology control our lives. Healthy astrology is mindful. I was thinking of a word that could really like encapsulate what I would like to be as an astrologer. And the thing is, I want to be a mindful astrologer. I want to be an astrologer that has that goes about life with lots of intention, with lots of knowing, with lots of meaning, right? And a balanced, healed, way about interacting with people. Healthy astrology is understanding. So, we see, a Pluto transit, Pluto's the planet of death. We see a Pluto transit, we freak out. But we have to understand, okay, so what does this really mean for us? What do Pluto transits usually look like for us? Everyone's transits look different in their chart. Healthy astrology is open-minded. There are many different angles, many different lenses that we can look through in order to find truth in astrology. And for that, we have to be open-minded. And I think that's a pretty healthy way about going about astrology. Now, toxic astrology. So, toxic astrology is limiting. It doesn't provide a lot of space for people to be the complex human beings that they are. It limits them to a certain way of behaving. People say, Capricorns are workaholics, that Tauruses are obsessed with eating. And that's very limiting because there's a lot of people who don't participate in those particular actions or have like a certain difficulty with that. Toxic astrology is extreme. So, these stereotypes get super extreme. Scorpios will tear your life down. Pisces men are the most unloyal, disloyal people in the whole world, disloyal sign. Um, Toxic astrology is reactive. It's reacting based off our emotions, reacting based off personal traumatic experiences that we've been through. And that's not right. Toxic astrology is egotistical. It is about the self. It is selfish, It is how can I benefit, when in fact we should be using astrology to kind of, take care of ourselves and understand ourselves and heal ourselves so we can cause less pain in the world and give to people, be generous with our love and our understanding. Toxic astrology is also fearful. So there's a lot of scary fear mongering that goes around in astrology with transits, Saturn returns. And that's not right. That's not helpful for people, especially young people who come across astrology and have to deal with these inaccurate, scary points that people are making. And on that note, we have to talk about how there is a responsibility with creators on social media, especially astrology creators. I've seen a lot of content online that is full of stereotypes, that is obviously using stereotypes to gain views, to gain traffic, to gain followers. And I see a lot of people preying on people's insecurities in order to gain followers, and people rely on them and depend on them. And that's what naturally happens as a creator. We naturally depend on people and look up to them as role models, but we have to be careful in that process. But there also has to be responsibility with TikTok creators. We see I've seen a TikTok where someone assigned, God complex to certain signs and certain placements. And that's not right, because God complex is an in-community mental illness term. It's used in areas where people are dealing with mental illnesses, mental disorders. So it really shouldn't be used in a casual context to describe someone who likes to have lots of power and likes to have leadership, right? So, this person said, I think Aquarius, Scorpio, Capricorn men are God complex signs. And I think what they're trying to say is that they like power. They like power pretty much. They like to be in control. But one thing that they said was that Capricorn men have God complex. And, I feel like that's not necessary in that TikTok because, we can talk about certain zodiac signs developing in a gendered context, right? That Capricorn men and Capricorn women develop differently in a Capricorn way due to their gender, due to how people treat cis men or just like appearing men and how people treat appearing women. But it's not right because this is limiting. And this is something that's going on to social media that young kids are watching and associating certain stereotypes with. And it's not a great development of identity for younger kids and younger adolescents. And we'll get into that. There are actually ethics in astrology. If you look at Isar's code of ethics, number one is never bring harm to a client. That is the prime directive that supersedes all ethics. Do no harm. So that is not what's going on here. I think that there's certain content on TikTok that does bring harm to individuals, that does make them scared, that does make them think twice about themselves. Number two, support with sensitivity and respect. So we have to be sensitive and we have to be respectful. We're not trying to be mean or judge somebody. We're opening space for people to become who they need to be. Next is we never needlessly frighten a client with extreme predictions nor create false hopes in a client. So we don't need to scare somebody. If we scare somebody, we have to provide solutions. And when it comes to using transits to say, oh, you're going to get into a relationship, you're going to get married, these are false hopes that, astrology can probably say that, but how deep are we getting and how is this going to be showing up in your life? I feel like transits show up in different ways for everybody. So those are just some ethics of astrology that certain astrologers follow and that all astrologers should follow. They are good counseling skills and ethics to follow. When it comes to using astrology in healthy ways versus toxic ways, I always think about when I first started getting into astrology, and I would always hop on the Pisces men bandwagon, where it's a common trope to hate Pisces men because they're probably not trustworthy, that they're doing stuff behind your back, that they are not good communicators. And I remember I posted some content about that, like stereotyping Pisces men pretty much. And that's not helpful, right? Because there are Pisces men out there who are emotionally responsible, who have their head on their shoulders, and who establish boundaries and communicate their boundaries. Another one is looking at Neptune as drugs. Neptune gets this association with drugs because it is the planet of delusions, and drugs cause delusions. Drugs cause you to interpret realities in different ways. But because Neptune rules Pisces in modern rulership, people tend to say Pisces are drug addicts or these are the addiction placements. So toxic, so not helpful, very limiting, very fear-mongering. Another one is Aquarius having a God complex, which we just talked about, right? And when we get into beauty and rising signs, that's a really good topic, which there might be an episode in the future where we talk about beauty and how, interpreting looks based on astrology can be racist. And we're going to get into that. So with beauty, there are Western ideals of what beauty is. A slender nose, a symmetrical face, not that big of a forehead, eyes not too far apart, small lips, and beauty and beauty standards change, but these are Western ideals, right? Blonde hair, pale skin, blue eyes. That's Western ideals of what beauty is. We invest in these Western ideals. We do it every day. We aspire to be beautiful. The beauty that we know is a Western beauty. It is a white beauty. You know, it's not a beauty that really takes into consideration people of color, people from different countries, people of different races. For example, people say, with the rising sign, that Virgo risings have slender noses because Mercury is more of like a slender sign. And so when you have a Virgo rising or Gemini rising, you will probably have like a thin face, like thin features, thin lips, thin nose, thin eyes, like that sort of like skinny face, I guess. Even with skin color, people say that Cancer risings have pale skin. But if you're a Cancer rising and you're black, like that doesn't really match up, you know? So, how do we really deal with situations like that? Libra, they say Libra risings have a symmetrical face. That is based on Western beauty. Symmetry equals beauty. And if we're saying all Libras are beautiful, then we're setting a beauty expectation on certain signs, on certain placements, which is not helpful. I think another thing that we might even talk about a little bit more is Jupiter. You know, Jupiter is all about expansion. It expands things, and then when we see it affect the physicality in astrology, a lot of people say like, oh, they're getting thick. They're getting a little butt, they're getting thick, but I feel like it can be kind of toxic when, let's say, like Jupiter's transiting your first house and it's like, ooh, you're going to get thick. But what if you deal with a lot of anxiety around your weight and a lot of trauma around that? And like your body image issues, right? Um, and Saturn is about limiting. So Saturn says, oh, you're going to be skinny, you're going to be bony, right? And what does that look like for someone who's not bony, who has a Capricorn rising, So I feel like it just becomes a very slippery slope when we start to associate looks with certain placements, because sometimes it doesn't match up. And what do we do in that circumstance? And what do we do in a circumstance where it's not inclusive of races, of different people, of people who look different from what Western beauty is? Um, and there's also scary degrees. We talk about the 22nd degree, the to kill or to be killed degree. People say it's the murder degree. I'm going to get murdered. I'm going to fight. I'm going to have to fight for my life. I don't like to look at it this way. I like to look at it as the defend your territory placement. People are going to come at you and you're going to have to defend yourself and state your case, right? And a lot of people, it is critical for a reason, right? But a lot of people make it super scary where it's like associated with death, and that's not helpful. That's not going to help you kind of attain growth in your life through astrology. So we see all of this going on with astrology, and where I step in is as a role model to say, hey, that's not right. That's not toxic. This is not helpful for human development. And I want to work on deconstructing it. I want to work on reforming it so we can deal with astrology in healthy ways where it's not affecting us negatively and it's not overwhelming us and controlling our lives. So my tactics when it comes to hacking astrology comes from my degree. So I have a degree in psychology. So I've studied different areas of psychology. I have a bachelor's degree. I don't have a master's degree, but I do understand how to conduct experiments, psychological experiments in a scientific way and analyze data. So my knowledge of mental health is strong, right? And I understand how certain environmental factors, social factors affect someone. And so when we think about astrology, we have to be mindful with it. We have to have a mindful relationship with it. One thing that I think is an interesting concept that I have a certain take on is that people are always like, oh, the sign that triggers you is the sign that you need to work on in your chart. So let's say you have a bad history of Scorpios. Scorpios trigger you. A lot of people would say, check what house Scorpio is in your chart. In my chart, I have it in the 5th house. So I would say maybe I need to heal my inner child, and that's why I'm not vibing with Scorpio energy. I posted about this and got some comments, so I'd like to share them. So Hazel Eyes 3100 says, Quote, I'm triggered by Virgos because they try to control me. Quote, end quote. Yeah, I guess we'll talk about it at the end. And then Healing of the Face said, quote, Aries, the few I've met gave me trauma, end quote. And then the next one is from Jackfrodite, who says, signs don't trigger me, abusive people do, and their sign has nothing to do with them triggering me or being abusive, which I think is a really good take. That is a really good take. Like, that is it. So, okay, first of all, the first two comments, we see people who actually do have a trigger of a certain sign, and why would you have a certain bias against a certain sign when it's just the sign, it's not the person, right? But what Jackfrodite said about, signs don't trigger you, signs don't abuse you, people do. And I think that's important to realize. We must not use astrology as a primary lens. We have to use reality as a primary lens and say, how are people treating me? How do I fit in this situation? How do I feel in this situation, in this space? But it's not the sign that's triggering you. It's your history of your trauma, of the people who have broke your heart and abandoned you. That's what triggers you. And they just happen to be that sign. So, I think it just gets a little tricky and it becomes a slippery slope in that sort of way. But I thought that was such a good point that I wanted to share with you guys. And I think another thing to say is that we have all 12 signs in our chart. We have the whole zodiac in our chart. We're not just one sign. I'm not just an Aquarius. I am the whole zodiac, just in different ways. It's expressed in different areas of my life, right? So since we have all 12 signs in our chart, we should appreciate all aspects of the 12 signs, the shadow side and the light side. So moving on, I wanted to introduce you to what I call the 5 sins of astrology. And so these are, I think, 5 ways that people go wrong when they use astrology. Starting with number 1 is people making generalized conclusions about signs due to personal experience, which we just talked about. This is a sin of astrology because it's about your personal experience with someone, and people are making generalized conclusions. They're saying, this is it. This is what I feel. This is what the situation is. Not really understanding the person for who they are, for who they show them as. And a big argument in this sin is that you have a whole birth chart. You just don't have a sun sign. People are like Cancer suns, but it gets complex because you have a Cancer sun, but you have your Cancer sun in a certain house, then you have your Cancer sun at a certain degree, and then your Cancer sun is aspecting other planets in different ways. So like you can't just say, oh, Cancer suns are the worst, because every Cancer sun is different that you probably meet. So astrology is nuance. It's about the complexities. It's about understanding people holistically rather than making quick judgments on people. And one argument that I've been thinking about is that astrology is identity based, right? It gives you a symbol. Astrology is a system of symbols that are assigned to us based on when we were born, which is a permanent fixed point in time. But because of this, astrology becomes identity based because these symbols, they are us, they define us, right? And then we use this to kind of say who we are. This is my identity. I'm an Aquarius sun. I'm a Taurus moon. And then there are meanings associated with these symbols. And people will look at these symbols and then use the meanings of the symbols to make conclusions and judgments on people, right? And, that's how astrology works, right? But when we do it in a toxic way, where we do it in an extreme way, where we do it in a limiting way, that's where it becomes wrong. And again, there are so many young kids on TikTok, young adolescents who are forming their identity. We think about the Erik Erikson identity formation process. And during adolescence, it's such an important time of someone understanding who they are. They're experimenting with their identity. Who do they want to be, and who do they want to live as? And if we are forming younger kids in astrology according to their identity, it can be very limiting, because let's say someone's totally water and like a 12th house. People are going to say, oh, you're weak. You don't know how to set your boundaries. You're too nice. but that maybe that person has good boundaries, you know? So it gets tricky when you do that. You know, I have exes that have broken my heart and dragged me across the world. Um, I've had like a triple Earth X, like a Capricorn Sun, Taurus, Moon, Virgo rising. I've had someone that I talked to that was a Scorpio, Sagittarius. Um, I think it's natural and normal to automatically say, oh, Capricorns are probably going to stab my back because my ex was a Capricorn and he was this way and he was kind of stubborn and that sort of thing. Or, you know, with Scorpio, like, oh, Scorpio, Sagittarius, they just want to run away. They just want to hide, you know, but that's not everyone. That's not everyone. And I've used like this bias that I've had, or just like this automatic bias that I have on signs. And I take a moment to understand what's going on. You know, does this really match up? Is this a healthy way about thinking about things? How can we look at this in a more open-minded way? Other tropes, you know, there's certain tropes that people love to hate in astrology, and they can get quite problematic. So, you know, thinking about Taurus, you know, Taurus, they say the sign is the sign of food, you know, but it can get quite difficult when you see TikToks about Tauruses and food and you have an eating disorder. You have something where you have a difficulty with eating, and then you're not obsessed with food. Perhaps you hate eating, you have a very difficult time with eating. And then it makes you think about that stuff and it triggers stuff in a way where it skews how you understand yourself and your own disorders. Another one is Aries and anger issues. You know, they say Aries has anger issues because Aries is ruled by Mars, which is the planet of war and aggression. But anger issues is a pathological thing. You know, it is something that people assign to you based on certain criteria. You know, it's a mental health issue. And so when we say Aries have anger issues, that's not correct because not all Aries have anger issues. Scorpio and sexuality, you know, Scorpios are usually sexualized on the internet. You know, they're into sex and they just want to have sex, and you know, they're very sexy, but there's actually asexual Scorpios that exist. There's people who don't really want romance, who don't actually get sexually attracted at all. And how do they deal with that? You know, how do you understand that? How do you feel acknowledged, and how do you feel seen in astrology when it comes to these limiting stereotypes? Another toxic issue in astrology is red flags versus green flags. You know, red flags are basically a concept saying that when you find something in someone that is a warning that they'll probably do something worse to you, it is a red flag. It is a warning. It's like, wait, what does this mean? Am I protected? Am I safe here? But when you talk about red flags, it has this feeling of just like feeling stuck, feeling deterministic, feeling set in stone, and you know, you can't do anything about it. And we have, I believe in free will as an astrologer, and I think that we have the capacity to work with our chart in different ways. You know, as we said, the chart is a story. It tells a story through the illustration. And I can read that and say, okay, this is interesting. Does this apply? How does this apply? And how can I use this in a helpful, constructive way? Number 2, the second sin of astrology is astrology controlling your life. So using astrology to make your every decision every day in relationships and love, you know, making judgments on people through astrology, and just astrology just taking over your behavior and taking over your free will. And as I said before, astrology is not the primary lens that I look at the world in. I look at the world for what it shows me. Based on the mental health skills that I've developed, I understand what is healthy for me and what is not safe for me, maybe what is toxic for me. So it's one of the many perspectives I use to make decisions. And, you know, I do use astrology to make a lot of decisions. And even today, like I was thinking about filming the podcast and I was like, is it a good day to film? And I was like, Moon in Aquarius, it's almost a Mercury Cazimi. I think it's pretty good. But when it comes to astrology controlling your life, it's all about accountability and it's all about responsibility, to hold yourself accountable for behaviors, for mistakes, and to hold other people accountable for behaviors and mistakes. And I think this happens because we want to have control of our lives. We want to have a grasp on our life, to understand what's going on, what's going to happen, how can I best, figure this out. And that's great. I think astrology is a great way to help us figure that out. But it's a tool, and it's a tool that we must use with wisdom and responsibility. The third sin of astrology is fear mongering. So we talked about this, scaring people with astrology without providing solutions. We talk about Pluto transits, Saturn transits, Chiron transits, and, we say this is when the world is going to shake us up. This is when some traumas are going to come up, some triggers might come up. We might have to process some sadder feelings, some more transformative feelings, deeper feelings. And I feel like a lot of people make this scary, that they say even the Saturn return, Saturn is going to clear everything out of your life that's not serving you. And sure, Saturn may do that, but in reality, that's not how life works. Life doesn't happen like clear, everything's gone. It happens in steps. It happens in little bits, right? And so when we start assigning these extreme aspects to transits, to certain planets, it doesn't help us in reality. That's what I think. When it comes to scary transits, I don't give it energy. I don't get scared. I observe, I notice, I take heed, and I see how it happens. And I'm going to go about life as I always do, in a responsible manner. I think, people talk about 8th house topics, 12th house topics, and people have placements in these charts. 8th house may symbolize a loss that you have, or a certain duty or responsibility that you have to tend to. And, people always hate on, or, even say 12th house placements have a karmic life, and perhaps they do. But when people hear that they just have a difficult life due to karma, it's not helpful, really. And I think that we need to work on that. And I also need to work on that. The fourth sin of astrology is that no system is better than the other. There's no right way of doing astrology. So there's whole sign versus Placidus. There's tropical versus sidereal astrology. There's certain charts. There's draconic charts. There's progressed charts. No system, I think, is the best system. I think that there's truth in every system, because every system of astrology does astrology according to the world. So the world is magical, and it's going to reveal its patterns to us however we do it. That's what I think. But there's truth in everything. And experience is very subjective. We all experience life in different ways. What I do is I love learning about all different parts of astrology. I love doing all different types of astrology. I look at my sidereal chart and I acknowledge my sidereal chart. I acknowledge traditional rulerships as much as I acknowledge modern rulerships. I have a lot of respect for Vedic astrology, and I have a lot of respect for tropical astrology. I think that they're just different ways of doing it, and whatever truth that you find through astrology is your truth. And number 5, the fifth sin of astrology is shaming beginners. So I used to do this. When I was first on TikTok, I used to hate on sun sign astrology. But what I realized, and sun sign astrology is basically astrology memes that use just the sun sign, and they don't use any other part of the birth chart, which is the nuance and the complexities of your chart. And I had to learn that there are steps to learning astrology. You don't just jump into a birth chart and reading in this complex way. First, you start with the horoscopes and the fun sun signs, and that sort of thing. And what is this sun sign? What's that sun? But that's a step. We have to learn the basics. We have to learn the foundation and the conversation of it all before we go more complex. That's just how people work. And that's how social media works nowadays in 2022. Social media is a little bit more simple the better. Get it out. Give me the info and let me leave, and that's pretty much sun sign astrology. But it opens doors for people to get deeper into astrology and form more nuanced relationships with astrology. So, deconstructing astrology is so important for us astrologers and for anyone who's an astrology enthusiast and use astrology in their life. We must figure out how to use astrology in a healthy way, in a way that takes care of ourselves. There's a lot of slippery slopes we can end up on when encountering these topics, and I kind of want to give guidance and I want to give an answer to what is toxic and what is healthy. And I hope that, me giving my perspective and my angle helps you reflect on your relationship with astrology. And I'm not telling you to think this way, although I do think this is a very healthy, moral way about going about astrology. But I want to show you my angle as an astrologer who has been in this game for a while and also has a psychology degree and mental health skills. So thanks for watching the Hacking Astrology podcast. Don't forget to rate, review, share the podcast. If you're not following me on my socials, follow me at Watery Aquarius on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. Link in the bio. And I will see you next week, raindrops. Thanks for coming along.